Okay, hello and good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining the second day of the webinar on Green Digital Finance for Achieving the SDGs. So yesterday we had the first day of this webinar and we had very interesting discussions and presentations on the topic. So today we will continue the session 2. Firstly, which is on the recent progress in green digital finance in Asia and Europe. And then we will have session 3 and session 4. So let's start with the presentation, the first presentation of today, which is the 9th presentation of the whole webinar. The presentation is on facilitating green digital finance in Bangladesh, importance, prospects and implications for meeting SDGs. It is by Dr. Saqib bin Amin of North-South University of Bangladesh. So Dr. Saqib, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Farad. Am I audible?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay, so thank you. Good afternoon. This is Saqib Amin from North-South University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. I'm working in the economics department at North-South University. At the outset, I'd like to thank Professor Farhad and Professor Hyun for inviting me in this webinar and also, giving the opportunity to contribute in the upcoming book. And my title for today's presentation is Facilitating the Green Digital Finance in Bangladesh, Importance, Prospects, and Implication for Meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. So as you can see from this slide, actually, Bangladesh is located in the northeastern part of South Asia, sharing a longest border, almost around 4,000 kilometers with India. And you can see the parameters. I have compared the data with 2009 data, and the data reported is in 2019 data. So you can actually clearly see the improvements of Bangladesh in terms of socioeconomic indicators. So the country is progressing since 2009, especially in the last 10 years. And this is really good to see that the Bangladesh economy grows on an average at a 7% rate since 2010. And in this development process, we have been able to reduce the extreme poverty to 10.5%, which was around 32% in 2009. So, and you can also see from this slide, Bangladesh is going to be one of the, biggest risers in the next 10 years. You can see there is a jump by almost 16 units from 42 to 26. And then in this process, we can also see that, Bangladesh is known as the new Asian tigers. It is known as the role model of the South Asia. It will be the 26th biggest economy in the world. Now the question should come, whether our economy, yes, we can see the development, but what we are actually trying to know, whether this developed economy is consistent in terms of using the digital green finance, because this concept is new. And this is also more important for Bangladesh because energy sector plays a very important role in the landmark success. So this is very important, to ensure Bangladesh can maintain all the, standard of the clean energy, so on and so forth. Now, this actually slide shows the importance of green finance and SDGs. There was a paper by Taghizadeh-Hesary and Issuance, where they have actually argued that future energy security, renewable investment is essential for any country, and there is an need for green finance. And green finance can provide the benefits for environmentally sustainable development. One of the many driving factors of the green finance is to meet the Paris Agreement goals and achieve the sustainable development goals. You can see there is a direct linkage of green finance with SDG 3, 7, 11, 13. And there is also some sort of indirect linkages with goal 14 and 15. In fact, Bangladesh has identified, realized the importance of the green finance. And you can see there are some sort of, flagship green funds, Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund and Bangladesh Climate Change Resilience Fund, which has been there since last 10 years to finance the renewable projects and to actually adopt the cleaner and green technology. To facilitate this funding, Bangladesh government has also introduced the action plan, Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, where 44 programs have been identified under 6 different thematic areas so that we can actually utilize this fund more appropriately, more efficiently. And if you look at the data, so due to time constraint, I did not report the data, but it will be included in the book chapter. So if we can see the data, then we can realize that the climate relevant allocation is around 7.5% of the total budget, and at the same time it is equivalent to almost 1% in the GDP. So there is no doubt actually Bangladesh is fully aware about the importance of this green finance. There is a very nice paper by Hossein, okay, published by the in the ADB working paper, where it was clearly discussed about the importance and the different schemes of green finance. But in today's presentation, we would like to actually discuss what are the different types of barriers prevailing in the Bangladesh economy in order to popularize the concept of digitalization in the green finance. So we have the government schemes. At the same time, the central bank, which is known as the Bangladesh Bank, is also running a few schemes, okay, in the green finance. And if you look at these stylized facts, there are 5 years data, 2014 to 2020. So yes, no doubt, there is a growth in the green finance funding. The green finance increases by almost by 150% in the last 5 years. But there is a fluctuations. There is a fluctuation, and also from my literature review and different case studies, we can see some sort of inconsistency in terms of disbursing the funds. Like sometimes the private commercial banks are at the top, and sometimes the foreign commercial banks are contributing almost 72% of the total direct green finance. And most surprisingly, the state-owned commercial banks has a very little impact on the green finance schemes in Bangladesh. It is always, roaming between 1.5 to 4%. This is very, very surprising. And you can also see the share-wise, category of the green finance. The left panel is the government schemes. On the right side, you can see the Bangladesh Bank schemes. So green finance is there. But what we can see, some sort of discrepancy, inconsistency in terms of the utilization of this finance. So what is the main motivation of this paper? One of the main motivation is to dig out why actually green finance has not been properly mobilized, even though we are fully aware about the issue of the sustainability, clean energy. And one of the important reasons is that the lack of digitization of the green finance. Okay, we have realized that in Bangladesh, we do not have sufficient digital finance technologies like artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain technologies, Internet of Things, so on and so forth. So these are absent, which is also reported in one of the UN report. Okay, however, it is evident that we all know that digital green finance has a potential to break through the existing financial barriers surrounding the renewable energy market. And we have seen a very gloomy picture. The recent global fintech index reported that Bangladesh has ranked 78 among 83 countries. And unfortunately, the Bangladesh currently ranks lowest out of 16 countries in the Asia Pacific region. So how can we overcome this situation? How we actually popularize the concept of digital green finance in Bangladesh? So this book chapter, we aim to identify the possible factors behind the digitization of green finance in Bangladesh based on the literature, policy papers, and case studies. So first of all, And also it is important to know that Bangladesh government has further introduced the policy plan, perspective plan, where they properly acknowledge the contribution of the green finance in achieving the future energy security and ensure the environmental and social sustainability. Now, what are the problems of this digital, how we can facilitate? What we have to remember that we do not have any proper strategic policies for any type of green digital financing mechanism. So it is very important we should have a proper policy. Without having a proper policy, it is very difficult, to properly utilize this fund. Okay, so still now, most of the renewable fundings are typically done by the traditional banking systems. So which could not actually give us the maximum outcome. So therefore, the first and foremost priority of the Bangladesh government should be given for formulating.
Saqib,
Yes.
time is limited. 1 minute, please.
Okay, formulating strategic policy guideline for digitization in the green finance. Then we also know that there are some sort of issues regarding the digital technology, because it releases some sort of chemicals which have a negative impact on the environment. So we also need to think about the proper regulation, environmental regulation, before introducing the policies. Then the country is still in the take-off stage of the development, so moving towards a high national income country. So cyber security is also very important. We have to ensure, we do not have any sort of issue regarding the cyber issues. We have to protect, we have to have a policy for the data protection regulations. We have to introducing possible anti-hacking mechanisms to safeguarding personal other financial data. Then we also need to have a proper collaboration process, okay, so that both the private public entities, the stakeholders, we need to consider all the stakeholders within the common umbrella to get the maximum utilization of the digitization of green finance. And we firmly believe that if we can incorporate these policies, then obviously within the 2041 we can actually become a role model for many countries in the world. Thank you very much, Farhad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saqib, for the interesting presentation, the case of Bangladesh. So the next presentation is by Dr. Sarvar Gurbanov of Ada University, Azerbaijan. The presentation is on analytical assessment of the green digital finance progress in the Republic of Georgia. Dr. Sarvar, please.
Thank you, Dr. Taghizadeh. Just please let me share my screen. Okay, so I think right now you see my screen.
Yes, it is clear. Just please make it full screen.
Okay. Okay, so as you may know, there's been a lot of developments in Georgia about especially Bitcoin mining. So actually, there's a very interesting discussion that goes on. They say that the Bitcoin mining actually pollutes environment, but Bitcoin disciples, they say that, for example, think about Georgia. Georgia produces 7% of the total Bitcoins in all around the world, and they do everything with the hydropower. So there's a kind of ongoing discussion about that. Actually, Bitcoin is not something that pollutes environment. So in this case study, what we try to do, we actually see that there's a. I'm going to share the details in a minute. So Georgia is really have a very favorable environment, and it is creating a welcoming business environment for Bitcoin mining, and it is open to adopt blockchain for further adoptions and further venues. So actually, in this study, we try to see that whether it's going to be a success story, it has a promising future, or actually it's going to generate some undesirable, unintended consequences in terms of acquiring, sustainable development goals. As you see here, of course, like other countries, Georgia has also a commitment on lowering down its greenhouse gas emissions. So, of course, in this manner, Georgia takes relevant, policy documents and policy, papers that it really makes these goals to happen. So, especially if you look at the these most recent report, you see that especially about the energy efficiency. So the in this country there are a lot of funding has been allocated, just to make it happen. So actually, there is also together with political will, there is also that kind of plans. So let's see how it's going to play out and how it's going to contribute to the these national commitment of the Georgia. So also we think that whatever Georgia is going to do about the adoption of blockchain and related, facilities, as you know, right now there is a DeFi, which is a kind of banking services for the blockchain technology, and they generally do all this stuff on these dApps. I mean, decentralized apps, as you know. So how Georgia is also going to, welcome the DeFi and blockchain. There's another issue that there's not the regulation, monitoring issues are a problem here. So definitely these are very big questions about Georgia. When it comes to energy, as you see, more than 75% of the electricity generation in Georgia comes from hydropower. So this is, why they, especially the Bitcoin miners, Georgia itself, they just promote that, the electricity generation especially does not pollute environment. But also we are going to flip the coin and we'll see some additional details about Georgia. So we looked at the total energy supply of Georgia, and we saw that in the last 8 years, especially in the last 8 years after the introduction of the blockchain technology, after the which started with the Bitcoin, and we see that on the total energy supply of Georgia, coal share, natural gas share is increasing. As you see, hydro, as a share of the total energy supply increases slightly. And if you see wind, it goes down, biofuels and waste goes down. And also, we see that oil's share on the total energy supply goes down. Another issue is that in the last 8 years, especially, please let's take a look at here. Fossil fuels share is increasing on the Georgia's energy supply. And if we flip the coin and we look at the total energy consumption, again you see that it's really interesting that a country which is very rich with the renewable energies, it is getting back to coal and oil products, natural gas. All these fossil fuels are starting to increase very, very considerably. Also, because of the Bitcoin mining, the electricity consumption of the nation increases very fast, which is 60%, slightly over 60%. So it shows that there's a really high demand for generating electricity. So if you look at the electricity share on the total energy consumption, it is slightly goes down. But again, in the last 8 years, after the introduction of the blockchain technology, you see that the fossil fuels share on the total energy consumption has increased. Maybe Bitcoin mining or these, yeah, it's not boosting the, electricity consumption, but it generates, I think, side effects. Kind of, it seems that generating side effects, but it is at the first sight. There is still ongoing process. We are developing this study. Most probably, once we are done, we are going to get a better and accurate answers for all these questions. But right now, actually, I want to show you the strategy we are adopting. And right now, actually, there are more questions than the answers. So this is why we keep, researching this topic and finding additional, evidences, especially scientific evidences on this topic. As you can imagine, in this topic, there is not a there existing literature expression. There's not existing literature does not exist for these actually that kind of studies. So it is a quite difficult issue. So again, as you see, of course, you see that the Georgian total energy supply exceeds, energy consumption. It's the another issue is that, which means that country has potential, it has resources, but are these resources going to be wasted, or they are going to be, channeled into the very good and promising field that's going to generate some desirable effects for the sustainable development goals? We are also going to see that one. And also, as you see, Georgian current account balance, I mean, deficit is roughly 60% of its GDP. So if Georgia starts to import energy, it's going to be another problem for the country, because it's going to make the current account balance to get bigger. So it's not easy to simply import, energy from outside international markets. I'm sorry. So as you see, that's exactly one of the issues that it really grabbed our attention, because in United States experience, they are, restarting the coal plants. So can you imagine, for example, they just they lower down the Bitcoin's production cost, and it says that with this methodology, adapting the coal production. So this company, Marathon Digital, is going to produce 55 Bitcoins daily from just 2 today. So I mean, in 2020. So which means that, can you imagine it is effect on the environmental pollution? So actually, we are worried about the same thing can happen. Georgia country can get back to the fossil fuels to meet the demand which comes from Bitcoin mining. So also, as you see, there are a lot of things that going on in Georgia. So they are again try to meet with the requirements of the green bond principles, and but the number still is not is far away from the desired level. But there are that kind of developments that take place in this country, especially if you can see here on the tax administration in Georgia, they really gave a lot of kind of incentives for the people, individuals.
Dr. Sarwar, the time is over.
I'm just concluding. So there's a very favorable tax administration environment. So we are also going to see that whether it can be adapted other digital finance things. And as you see, there is right now energy crisis in this country because of the Bitcoin farming. And also we try to see that whether there is a decoupling of the economic growth and emissions. It seems that it's not happening. We can't say that it's happening. So we are going to try our best to look at the environmental Kuznets curve hypothesis tested for the Georgia, and will see the results. So that is the brief introduction about our study. So thanks for your patience. I'm very sorry for talking too much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Dr. Sarwar, for the presentation on the Georgian case. It's interesting. So let me invite the next presenter, that Dr. Vijeta Singh and Dr. Nandita Mishra will jointly present this paper. Dr. Vijeta Singh of MIT World Peace University and Dr. Nandita Mishra of Linköping University, Sweden. So the work is on green digital finance, mapping current practices and pattern in India and the way forward. Dr. Vijeta, please, or Dr.
Hi.
Nandita.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us and giving this opportunity to present our work. I will share my screen. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, just please make it full screen.
Yeah. So thank you for the introduction, Dr. Farhad. So our topic is green digital finance, mapping current practices and pattern in India and the way forward. So we are three authors in this work, Dr. Vijeta, myself, and Dr. Farhad. The overview for today's presentation is that I will be giving a brief introduction and an overview of digital green financing, our study motivation, objective of the study, the current status in India, what role the technology will play in bridging the gap which we have identified, and then what progress the India has done in the field of green digital finance, and then we'll conclude with the policy implication. We all know that we need finance for enabling all our human progress, but we must make sure that the development which we are doing is sustainable. And therefore, I think we all are well aware that we are emphasizing a lot on green financing. So green financing, although it does not have a very standardized definition, but still it means that financing of environment sustainable projects. Now we see, and with previous studies in this field, we have great literature supporting this argument that there is a huge gap in financing of the project. So there is a huge gap in the investment and the financing, the requirement and the financing in the field of green financing, and especially the condition is very bad in the developing countries. So and also the literature has proved that digital green financing is one of the solution to boost, to increase the financing, green financing. So our chapter will emphasize on digital green financing, although there is very less literature in this field, but still I think this is a very important and very crucial method of boosting green financing. It is estimated that we require 1.4 trillion US dollars per annum in developing countries to attain these SDGs. And OECD's report has clearly specified that we have currently only 1 trillion US dollars. That means we are way below the requirement. Now, digital green financing is a solution to this problem because it is cheaper, it is quick, it has accurate information which we require for financial decision making. And therefore, in this chapter, we will be emphasizing only on key technologies, which is big data, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, web-based financing, and blockchain. And also we'll try to define green financing, green digital financing in this chapter. Our study motivation is this, that we all know that there is very less literature on digital green financing, and especially with its role to attain SDGs. So we will try to fill in this gap of literature. Also, if we talk specifically about India, green financing flow in India was 17 billion in the year 2017 and 21 billion in the year 2018, which is way below the requirement. Now, India is home to 1/6 of the population, and therefore we contribute around 8% to the global GDP. And therefore, I think India holds a very important role when we talk about achieving SDGs. And if we say that India is lagging behind, obviously we will not be able to attain the SDGs by year 2030, which we target to achieve. Also, we think that digital green financing will ease this problem, because this will standardize and it also mitigates the duplication of tasks. At present, this study will focus on the current status of digital green financing in India. We'll identify the gaps and then talk about the way forward. How should we go about filling in these gaps? So we have identified 4 objectives of our study. The first objective will be to understand and to study the current status of investment requirement for attaining SDGs, and we'll identify the gap. Then we'll study the role of digital green financing in bridging this gap in India, to study the status and challenges concerning digital green financing in India, and then we will connect digital green financing with green growth indicators. So what is the current status in India? So in 2019, Indian government announced that we will have 175 gigawatt of renewable power by the year 2022, that is next year, and 450 by 2030. Now, this ambition requires 200 billion of fresh investment. And at present, obviously, we are way below that requirement. We require a lot more. And therefore, if we talk specifically India as country towards attaining this global gap, then India is responsible for a gap of 20% of global gap for 10 SDGs and 10% for the 6 main SDGs. So meeting this goal, especially after COVID, is a big challenge. And therefore, we will be emphasizing on what exactly is the gap and how we can fill in. We cannot avoid talking without or not talking about COVID, because maybe the situation in the beginning of 2020 was better, but because of COVID, the situation has gone even worse. So when we talk about target and the requirement of investment in next 10 years, we require more because we have taken a step back because of COVID. So India obviously is off track with its agenda of 2030 of sustainable development, and COVID has pushed back further back, because we have now 16 million more people in India who are below poverty line. There are number of students or children who are out of school has doubled. The energy consumption has reduced by 13%. India is generating close to 18,000 tons of waste in 2020. The only positive news, I think, is that the carbon emission has decreased by 26%. But also, the digital or the country's digital transaction has increased in last year, because RBI reported that we have 100 million transaction, or maybe a transaction of 67 billion daily, which was done digitally. So obviously, to attain this problem of attaining SDGs and to help country with green financing, I think technology will have a great role to play to fill in this gap. I will hand over now to Dr. Vijeta to carry on further with the presentation. Vijeta.
Good afternoon all. So I'll be now presenting the rest of the presentation. So the role of technology in filling the gap. So what we can see in context of digital green finance is that it requires a lot of use of technology, right? And India, being one of the leaders in terms of fintech, has taken up this task, and they are making use of technology, especially in finance areas. So the use of technology like artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, these are being used. And they are being used because they reduce the cost for the producers as well as the consumers, right? So it is a solution which will lead us to meet the sustainable development goals. So Ma'am, can you move the PPT? Okay.
Yeah.
So what we can see in context of India is that basically the digital finance in India has been taken up by the government of India and the commercial banks. So the commercial banks are making the use of the blockchain technology, especially with respect to credit scoring, updation of contracts, and lending mechanisms. Thereafter, we can see some of the initiatives by the government of India, say, for example, this electronic benefit transfer system, RTGES, IMPS. These are being used by the government of India to facilitate digital transactions, digital finance transaction. And one of the key initiative that was taken by the government of India was Unified Payments in India in September 2016, which was done post demonetization. Pre-demonetization. And the idea was to actually facilitate more and more use of digital finance in India and thereby reducing the use of cash. So when the UPI was launched, the percentage of digital finance use in India was very less. But after the launch of UPI in September 2016, we can see that the use of digital finance in India has gone very high. So what has been the most important contribution of UPI? The cost of UPI transaction is less than 1% of the total transaction done, for the per transaction done. So that has been the one real benefit that has been, I could say, that has been to the consumers most, right? Including the merchants as well as the common individuals. Thereafter, India started to have its national biometric unique identification system, which is known as Aadhaar. Now it's a national database for all the citizens of India. This was primarily done for the identification purposes like citizenship requirements and resident proofs, etc. But they made use of this in facilitating digital finance in India. So what they did is that they linked the bank accounts with the Aadhaar. So the KYC requirements and thereafter all the processes, they were eased out with the use of the Aadhaar. So Aadhaar has been one such, I would say, initiative by the government of India, which has eased the use of digital finance in India, especially with Aadhaar-enabled payment system, AEPS, which is quite popular in India. Thereafter,
the time is limited.
Okay,
Yeah.
Ma'am, please move.
So it's okay.
So,
you can, in 1 minute, if you can wrap up.
Okay, so what we can basically see is that there has been a lot of initiatives taken by the government of India as well as the private corporate sector in making use of digital green finance for financing renewable energy projects or sustainable development projects. But there are certain key barriers. Say, for example, regulation has been one big issue. Policy inconsistency, especially with respect to use of bitcoins or cryptocurrencies. Thereafter, the financial literacy, and even in financial literacy, digital financial literacy is an important barrier that needs to be taken up by the policymakers in India. And right now, it is too much dependent upon the government initiatives and the public sector banks in India. The responsibility now should be shared with the rest of the corporate sector and other sectors of the economy to facilitate and to make the use of digital green finance in meeting the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nandita and Vijita, for this interesting chapter on India. So next we are going to have a discussion, and at the same time to our participants, if you have a question, you can type your question in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and then I will ask this question from the presenters. So let me invite Professor Kim Chang-soo of Yonsei University, Korea, for kindly discussing this paper. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining this webinar. We are waiting for you, please.
All right, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, clearly.
All right,
please.
It's my great honor to participate in this webinar and discuss about good papers. And then I kind of remembered the title about the Brundtland Report, Our Common Future. So our talk is about our common future in this planet. Well, even though nowadays there was some report issued by the U.S. government, there's extraterrestrial existence, maybe, but as far as we know, this Earth, the blue planet, is so far we know, is the only place we live. So we have to preserve this Earth. And our discussion in this sense is very important here for our common future. And then I think the webinar is very important because it provides us some forum to exchange our idea, okay, and what's occurring in the different countries. By my impression about all these papers is just about we are not clearly have some clue about the solutions of all the problems we have. And then in here, I think that there are three different areas we have to consider. The first one is mainstream finance. Okay, so it's a green digital finance. So the first one is mainstream finance. The second one is fintech, which has risen recently. And in Korea also, the fintech industry is kind of a good opportunity for economic development, but also it is also concern for many people in the area of consumer protection, also the regulatory arbitrage between traditional banks or financial institutions and these fintech companies. And third one is about green finance or sustainability finance that we are talking about. So here we have the combination of green and fintech or mainstream finance. Well, the mainstream finance, we have accumulated a lot of knowledge about motivating people and then how to handle with the risk involved. However, recently fintech industry, it is kind of threatening the existence of traditional financial activities. And then we have to think about the way for coexisting in the financial industry between these fintech companies and mainstream finance companies. Now, in this fintech industry, obviously there are problems too. The big problem here is a cyber security. And then everybody is concerned about this cybersecurity. And then as long as we cannot resolve this issue satisfactorily, and then it will have also the same problem for green, finance area too, green digital finance area too. And then issues in green stuff is about transparency. The good example of this will be the green washing. Okay, and then people think it's green and they will pretend to be a green project, but in fact it is not green. It is the same project as usual, but they kind of uh, pretend that it is a green project. And also there is a problem of consumer protection because suppose you issue green bond and many people may try to buy those bonds, but this green stuff is in itself is quite right ambiguous, and it could be anything or it could be nothing. So there must be some important definitions in this area. So there's a discussion of taxonomy. So in the European area, there is a European taxonomy. In Korea also, we developed our own taxonomy. But this taxonomy may not be enough for all this. So that is another concern. So there are three papers in this session. And then the first one is about Bangladesh. As far as I know, the concern here about Professor Amin is about the lack of technology, right? That may be your concern when we try to transform to green digital financing. But on the other hand, the Professor Singh said Well, India, they have technology, right? So you two guys are neighboring countries. So we have to find out some way to co-work and get over the difficulties and give some knowledge to the neighboring country. In return, you may get some from the neighboring country too. So that is one thing I observed here. And another one is about the second paper, Professor Gorbanov presented. It's about Bitcoin mining. Well, then first thing I want to know is why? Why Azerbaijan gives such a great incentive for this mining? Well, you said you have a lot of resources, electricity resources, but so the cost is cheaper. But I want to know why this Bitcoin mining is so important for your country. That is my question. If possible, please answer my question. And then my last comment is here we are talking about green digital financing. It's about financing, but if there's no great project, financing is useless. Even though we have money, we cannot use it. So the most important thing is in our area is we have to try to develop a good real project. And then we have to persuade people that if you do the green stuff, their profitability is also guaranteed. If not, this financing will not be satisfactory in achieving our goal of SDG. So we have to think about, in general, first, how to motivate people to create many green financing area or many green investment area. So I think that is more fundamental thing. So let me stop my comment here. So I raised a couple of questions to Professor Gobernov or Professor Amin or Singh, how to cooperate between you two guys about technology. So if possible, please answer my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for the clear points and that you raised, which are completely related to the book that we have. And so before I invite the panelists to answer if they want to answer, I also have some comments that I wrote here. So regarding Dr. Sarwar's chapter, although these points raised by Professor Kim, but since this book is on green digital finance, so it means for the readers, finance is important. So they want to know that what are the innovations, what are the role of digitalizations for making the finance easier. So this is the aim of having this book, and so we expect that all chapters follow this. For example, you talked about cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrency, it is okay, but is there any example of utilizing cryptocurrencies for financing green projects? For example, using cryptocurrencies for financing hydro projects. So you mentioned that majority of the electricity in Georgia is coming from hydropower. So where does the finance is coming from? This is one point. If there is any, for example, example of utilization of new technologies, such as e-crowdfunding, such as peer-to-peer lending platforms, such as using blockchain technologies for facilitating the finance. So this is very important. We are looking for finance and using technologies in facilitating finance in green projects. And regarding Dr. Vijeta and Nandita's presentation, this is interesting. So you highlighted the technologies, especially financial technologies, but it would be more interesting that in your chapter because nowadays there are many technologies available in India, but what are the challenges? Why, although these technologies are there and the demand is also there, the huge investment gap is there, why still we don't see that a significant role of these technologies in helping to fill the finance gap? What is the problem? What are the challenges? Because the chapter, although the chapter is going to give an overview, but it needs to provide some solution, some policy recommendation to be useful for the policymakers in India and also for other countries from the Indian experience and so on. So this is important. So from the panelists, Dr. Saqib, do you want to respond to Professor King's comments?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Farhad, for giving me the floor. And I really, appreciate Professor Kim's comments. Yes, actually, we realize the importance of having a collaboration, because collaboration among the different stakeholders is extremely important for advancing the development of digital green finance market. So since India has a wide range of technologies, I think perhaps it is a great idea if we can have some sort of regional collaboration, and we can actually take lessons from the other countries as well as who have successfully developed the technologies and introduced in increasing the digitalization of the green finance. So I really appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Sarwar, do you want to add?
Thanks for the great feedback, especially to Professor Chang-Soo. So I think Professor made there's been a mistake on the question, because the case is not about Azerbaijan. Professor's question is about Azerbaijan, that why Azerbaijan is giving that kind of priority to cryptocurrency. It's not Azerbaijan, it's Georgia. So as you know, Azerbaijan is a country, it is a resource-rich nation with fossil fuels. But Georgia, on the contrary, say that we have renewable energies readily available, so we can use it. So of course there can be a lot of justifications of Georgia why they support cryptocurrency that much. For example, think about El Salvador. El Salvador announced Bitcoin as a legal tender. It's citing that the transfers of remittances, which sums to $6 billion. They said that we are going to it's going to be very cost saving to transfer that amount of money. So Georgia, it simply has a favorable environment. So actually, it is a good sign that the policymakers really open to new technologies. They are quite, fine adopting all these. So, but again, Dr. Farhad, what you said about the align our study to the scope of the book, we are also going to take into consideration this one, and we will polish our study. Thanks, Professor Chang-Soo. Thanks, Dr. Farhad. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nandita and Dr. Vijeta, do you want to respond to Professor King?
Yeah. Thank you for your comment, and it was really helpful. And I think yes, we should collaborate, and I would like to answer both the comments, like from Dr. Farhad, also because the answer to the first question lies in the second comment, because the challenge which India face, we do have technology, but the challenge we face is lack of transparency. So therefore, maybe other countries may not be able to are not able to take the benefit from that. And also there is lack of standardization. The regulations are not standardized, and the cybersecurity. So I think all the countries, even more developed countries than what we are, we all should take collaborative effort towards this. And we will definitely try to highlight the challenges which India is facing in this chapter. And thank you for your comment. I think that would be very beneficial for us to overall conclude the chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Vijeta, do you have anything to add? Please.
Yes, I have a comment to make. Professor Chang was talking about something in terms of collaboration. So what I can see is that we can make use of regional economic platforms like SAARC and BIMSTEC, through which we can collaborate on such kind of projects, because both India and Bangladesh, they fall in very, environmentally sensitive zones. So the greater cooperation through government sources using regional economic platform would really help us in boosting the use of green digital finance in South Asia overall, and in like Bangladesh and India in particular.
Thank you very much. So let me see the chat box. There is a question from Dr. Mohammed Asmi that I think Dr. Nandita already answered. So the question is how India can exploit the digital finance. What is the weaknesses on existing policy that I think you have mentioned? And there is also a question by Dr. Imran, how to balance the trade-off between poverty alleviation and green finance in terms of developing and less developed nations. So this question is not so much related to this session, but if any of our panelists want to answer. So definitely, I mean, if I can answer that, when we are talking about the poverty, since just recently we have this book, I edited this book, that poverty reduction for inclusive sustainable growth in developing Asia, that just recently published. So poverty, it's a very general topic and it's covering different aspects, many different fields. But if I want to answer very short, energy poverty is one of the critical issues that which is not just limited to developing countries, but even in developed countries, energy poverty is a matter. Even in European Union, even in Japan, in the US, and so on. Lack of access to electricity or a lack of affordability of energy and electricity is one of the issues, which is affecting the, quality of life, well-being, and so on. Definitely, if we can have more access to finance and bringing green finance or introducing a new file, which is so-called green finance, that can help to increase the, electricity generation, especially through the renewable energy resources, it can help to reduce or alleviate the energy poverty. So, but if you are interested, we have a chapter on energy poverty in this book, and it is explaining this. So let me wrap up this session, and we move to the session 3. So I'm grateful to panelists and also to Professor Kim and the participants for their questions and comments. Session 3 is on role of fintech and financial innovations in scaling up the green digital finance. We will have 3 presentations in this session. The first presentation is from Europe by Tim Schlofer, Distributed Ledger Technology and Climate Finance. Tim, please.
So now you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Does it work? All right, perfect. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here. I will present joint work with Carsten Schulz from the University of Groningen. We are going to have a look in general in distributed ledger technology and how to link it or how it's linked with climate finance. So what I'm going to do is give you a short introduction where we come from, then the problem and our research approach to it, and then finally I will conclude. We have already heard a lot mentioning blockchain technology so far, which is one of the distributed ledger technologies, but there are more. So what I try to do now is like start from the very beginning. What is the distributed ledger technology? So in short, it's a transaction book a ledger which can store all kinds of data. And that transaction book is shared across different parties or different different parties who contributed to the network, which ensures through a consensus process that the data is correct. So there are different consensus processes and very different sets of distributed ledger technology, which we elaborate on in our chapter. Also, what is also important to mention in the beginning, so there are different governance structures of a distributed ledger technology, So the most common one is a public permissionless one, so everybody can access it, everybody can run, or everybody can interact with it. So when you look at examples, the most common ones are blockchains, for example, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Cardano. So to mention, the blockchain is a way on how to structure the data in the ledger, but there are also other ways how to structure the data in the ledger. So for instance, a directed acyclic graph, which are the two most famous ones are IOTA and Nano, who are based on a directed acyclic graph. Then all of them have some main features which come along with them. So what everybody knows, and usually people consider DLT as a cryptocurrency because usually that's the main, or that's one of the features everybody knows. So they all come along with a native token, which is considered as a cryptocurrency. And also what they all do when we talk about public permissionless ledgers like Bitcoin, that you can have transactions without having any intermediary. But also on top of that, of these main features, some protocols allow for other stuff. What the most famous and the most critical invention, I think, were smart contracts, for what the Ethereum blockchain is really famous for, which are coded immutable contracts, which are carried out as programmed initially. Those, as we have heard already, allow for decentralized applications, which are applications which not run only on one device, but across multiple. Then we have oracles, which link the real world to the DLT system, so which import external data to the DLT system so that it can be used by, for instance, a smart contract. And then also what we have is tokenization. So that's the digital representation of assets, which can be digital or real life assets on top of a DLT system. So this was now like a very short wrap up of the technology. We elaborate more on that in the chapter to give the reader like an easy, understandable way of understanding the DLT sector or the spectrum of technology. The problem, what we have heard already very often today is, so we have funding gaps for climate mitigation, adaptation, and also for sustainable energy production. So the research question, the main research question what we have is, okay, how can DLT be utilized to close those gaps? And in which way, what's the current status of applications? So what we do to do that, so we review the technology, what's the status quo of it, what kinds of inventions there are. Then we explore potentials and limitations of the technology. Then we review real life applications in the sector of climate finance, and then we derive policy recommendations. Just to link it a bit to the first section we had, so we heard already the problem of energy demand in Georgia, or like the problem with mining. So this technological sustainability, we will have a small subsection about it. So if you're interested in, then when the book is there, you can have a look there. So what I'm going to do is, because it's a big topic, I will give you a short overview about our applications, because I think that's the most interesting ones. So because the sector is really broad, so it's a bit tricky to structure it. But I give you now some overview about the application categories we are thinking of, or we are looking into. So one which was already mentioned today is decentralized finance. So a financial system, a decentralized financial system, which is on top of a DLT. So banking services which are decentralized. Then another application field is asset management. So you can think of it of bonds or funds who use DLTs to improve their structure. Then we have one thing, which is measurement, reporting, and verification, mainly of greenhouse gas emissions. So to measure like greenhouse gas emission of a project, for instance, report it, verify that that data is correct, and then for third parties to be able to know that that data is correct. And then we have tokenization and social funding. So social funding, we have talked about already about peer-to-peer lending a bit today. That's one way, or donations. So they are in red because I'm talking a bit more about them. I give you concrete examples. So for instance, for tokenization, one application field is carbon markets. So you can enhance carbon credit data through MFR, MAV, and then certify those results as tokens on a DLT, which makes them tradable and more accessible. So there are two initiatives, or at least two initiatives, working on that. And then the other example I want to give you are donations. So what they make use of DLTs is that it's transparent, everybody can see the transactions, and it makes more accountable. So like, for instance, projects or NGOs, so that the donor can see exactly where the money goes to, and that is more secure for the donor. So there are three examples for that. And now I think now you got at least a small picture of what is there. For sure, it's much bigger, and the sphere is really broad, but just that you have a small impression. So what we figured out in the end, so like DLT is, on the one hand, it can improve existing tools we have, financial, like finance tools, digital finance tools, but it also can really create new kinds of solutions for problems we have. Then what we also figure out is what is crucial to, if you want to use a DLT for your application case, even if it might be limited, it's critical how to choose the technology, or which technology to choose. Like if you use one where you have smart contracts on top, or like if you choose to have other technological features. We will about more on that in our paper if you're interested in. Then what we think, or what we figured out, I mean, it's quite clear, but I think it's really important to talk about regulation if you talk about DLTs, in particular value transfers. So there's a lot of going on in the world at the moment. So the European Union has proposed a regulation. Also, US is working on it. And I mean, the news from China you probably have heard. But that is key for a wide application of DLTs in the sphere, in particular of finance, and in particular of climate finance. So to wrap up, so like applications in DLT, applications of DLT in climate finance are really in the early stage. So there are examples which we try to give you an overview about, but yeah, it can be that like in the next 10 years, it increases heavily. And so I think it's a very interesting topic to research. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, team, for the presentation. It's very interesting and completely relevant to the book. And so let's go for the next presentation. Then after that, we will have, after the third presentation, we will have a Q&A. So next presentation, I think Dr. Renoka Deshmach, she's not available here today, so maybe she joined later. So let's move to the third presentation of this session by Dr. Ahmad Khaliq from International Islamic University of Malaysia. The presentation is on the potential role of fintech and digital currency for Islamic green financing towards an integrated model. Dr. Khaliq, please.
Thank you, Dr. Fahad. Thank you everyone for your time here. believe me, I'll try to finish this as fast as possible. So can you see the slide? Farah, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So as we can see, for our part, we have been given the opportunity to present and try to discuss with regards to the potential role of fintech and digital currency for Islamic green financing towards an integrated model. So these are my teammates, Dr. Asmi, myself, Dr. Ahmad Khalid, Dr. Fuad, Dr. Hasanuddin, and Dr. Anwar Al-Pichai. Basically, for this presentation, I would just like to outline what we think it is necessary for us to share in the write-up. So as a brief, we start with introduction and some studies with regards to the topic, samples of case studies, and the concept of Islamic green finance, potential of fintech with regards to the green finance in providing the financing facilities, and of course, last but not least, would be on conclusion and policy recommendation. So to begin with, as we all know that this idea started in the beginning of 21st century, which concern has been raised towards a sustainable economic development that calls for environment preservation and ecological balance. And according to Alliance Financial Inclusion, they highlight that the broader areas that cover the investment of green finance are basically the renewable energy, energy efficiency, pollution prevention and control, biodiversity. They also include the circular economy initiative and sustainable use of natural resources and land as the areas that covers by the investment when it comes to the green financing investment. On top of that, Walls et al. 2015 has said that green finance also defined as including all forms of investment or lendings that consider environmental effect and enhance the environmental sustainability. And for that reason, a number of earlier literature found that the key component of green finance is issuance of the green bond itself, which is one of the fastest growing fixed income securities in providing the capital support to run these environmental friendly projects. And according to March 2017, they talk about the fintech. Fintech basically seen as a scenario when there is any technological innovation applied to facilitate financing activities, it become a financial technology. And this include an extension of that represent technologies even that are disrupting financial services, traditional financial services, which includes mobile payment, money transfer, loan, fundraising, and also asset management. And the arrival of fintech, especially the blockchain technology itself, has opened the scope of many other digital forms of currency, such as cryptocurrencies, which is one form of the digital money intangible in nature, and it exists only in the electronical form. So likewise, there are also more than 2,000 active cryptocurrencies. For example, we have the most famous one is the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and the rest. Thus, it seems as that the momentum of financial inclusion, efficiency, and also the productivity can be successfully achieved with this innovative technology. And in fact, nowadays, it is a precondition for the development of any financial instrument to include the green finance. If we just glance through the global statistic and development of green finance, it shows that among the top issuers of the green bond, basically the US, Germany, and also the France, which issued almost 51.1 billion, 40.2 billion, and 32.1 billion respectively. And apart from the market expansion of green finance through this green bond, it is important to focus also on financial technology for its further rapid growth and coverage of various green projects. And with regard to that, we see there is an important of a key component of Islamic green finance, for example, the green sukuk, which also Sharia compliant investment opportunities for achieving the sustainable environment. And in that regard, countries like Malaysia remains the forefront of all other Islamic countries that introduced the first green sukuk in 2017. For example, it was issued by Taghizadeh-Hesary to finance almost $62 million in various solar energy related projects. And in fact, many other countries have issued the green sukuk and the global market cumulative issuance roughly amounted to reach 8.8 billion USD. And with that regard, there are certain issues that we see it is important to be highlighted. For example, we see that such at all 2019 forecast that the actual amount to be needed, the actual amount needed to successfully complete these green-based projects are insufficient, inadequate. First, to reduce the gap between the demand for and supply of this green finance, the application of digital currency offered by fintech platform can be a best alternative. In fact, NASRI 2018 suggested that the blockchain technology can be applied in 3 ways to finance green projects. First is through the blockchain application for sustainable development. Second is blockchain use cases for renewable energy, decentralized electricity markets, and climate finance. Example usage of cases. And thirdly is the innovation in financial instrument itself, including the green bonds. So accordingly, investing in Islamic green finance also seen in line with the practice of Islamic ethics that oppose the protection of environment. On top of that, the Sharia requisite can be also fulfilled. So realizing this huge demand of for a green finance project, it is an opportunity for Islamic green project to utilize the innovative tools of fintech as the motivation for financing the greens project. And adoption of this approach will be a key to future success of Islamic green finance sector because of certain factors. For example, like it can foster economic and environmental benefit, it can gain a global competitiveness by efficiency and productivities, and also it can increase the flow of information with adequate and analytical capacity. Next, we highlighted the important role of fintech to green finance, and the discussion took place in from a very general concept to the need of Islamic from an Islamic perspective. And for that reason, we can see that using these fintech technologies allows the banks and investors to utilize the data to measure the correct or accurate risk and grant an opportunity to design the policy and financial activities whenever climate changes happen. And other literature also found to say in supportive to assert that, for example, Chapter 1 assert that blockchain could help in endorsing cryptography and sustainability by looking at its effectiveness in bookkeeping entry and induce the modern economy. Likewise, Gupta and Knight mentioned that mobile money services like M-Pesa prove how developing countries quickly adapted it ahead in terms of usage. And with regards to the concern raised, there are also concerns raised on the Sharia compliant matters. For instance, Biakwan and Radwan places greater emphasis on the importance of the prohibitions of interest for the fintech and Sharia compliant business model. With this arrangement, the fintech subsequently leads Islamic financial institutions to be transparent by creating a good linkage between the customer and the investors from the beginning of the project. Next slide is basically shows that some samples or case studies on the subject, for example, using the fintech in providing the financial facilities. And as we know, the role of fintech in the green finance is significant, whereby the fintech serves to facilitate the data collection. And when it comes to the climate-related statistic, unfortunately, there were not much data available, and it causes higher searching costs, especially to the investors and banks, whereby they have to pay extra and do other due diligence to get the data. And it results to another risk-pertaining issue, so that the climate risk is not priced adequately. In this note, the role of innovative solution required to measure the climate-related data efficiently and effectively, and the fintech found to fill the gap where the existing of digital technologies like AI, big data, blockchains serve to bring opportunities to collect all the information including climate data in a cost-efficient way. And as we mentioned, we did summarize some of the several case studies presented just to elucidate on the importance of fintech towards the green finance initiative. For example, like the case of the Sun Exchange in South Africa, they utilized the blockchain based for the project of solar panel in a micro leasing platform. And it was also a case by Power Ledger, WePower, SolarCoin, Ingredient. Okay, so basically these are examples of a case study where we see it is important to be highlighted. Next, with regards to the importance of giving an opportunity for the Islamic green finance to grow, to provide the financing facilities. As we all know, the initiative for SDGs all started back then in 2015, and we see a good demand by 194 countries, including the EU, to embrace the treaty. And these milestones subsequently show and paved way for policymakers to implement policies on sustainable development with the aim to support grander saving on environment degradation, social inclusion, as well as safeguarding the natural ecosystem. So for that reason, it motivates the annual global investment in clean energy, and it shows that there is a growth by 3% from 2016 to 2017, amounted 3.5 billion according to Climate Bond Initiative. Next, we feel necessary to show some examples of how does the traditional Islamic contracts applied in the issuance of green finance project. As we can see that generally Sukuk issuance possess a distinct framework from one another. So, and the example of, in the summary, we can say that majority of these framework are structured in a tailored manner in accordance to the classification and usage of the financing facilities. So for that, for instance, we have a dual features of Sukuk, which are ranked as a feasible alternative for funding sustainable development ventures. And among of the examples that we showed in the write-up includes structures such as using the equity, we use the musyarakah and mudarabah contracts, using the debt, for example, murabah and wakala, also tawarruk concept, using leasing, okay, the ijarah contracts, and also the charity, for example, using a wakaf-based contracts to finance the.
Dr. Ahmad, the time is going to be finished.
Okay, sure. So just in a few seconds. Next is that we talk on the importance of basically this part. We just explain where are the gaps and what is the necessary steps that we have to take further, and that leads us to the proposed model. For example, you can see in the slide here on the right upper hand, this is the proposed model of integrated fintech and digital currency for Islamic green financing. So basically, just to summarize, if you can see that from this proposed model, the modus operandi is very simple, whereby you can see from the left hand corner, okay, there will be a green-based activities. For example, these are numbers of green-based projects. We have renewable energies, building, housing, transportation, and whatnot. And these projects will be offered and be given a platform by the fintech institution, fintech companies, or which again in 2A you can see here, okay, FDC, okay, the fintech and digital currency will act as a platform to operationalize the venture, and here the contracting parties will engage through the integrated smart contracts. So basically, investors will come here and invest in the Sukuk based contract, for example, the four mentioned just now. So these are the proposed model that we think could further enhance the giving of financing facilities. And last but not least, we explain the conclusion and certain policy recommendation with regards to the proposed model, whereby we see that there is a big potential in applying this model to further escalate and tap further the financing need in the economy. In fact, there are large of untapped opportunities in this sector, and this existing Islamic financial institution can allocate certain the resources that we have into this segment to carve a niche market for the Islamic finance. With that, I thanks for your time. I pass to Dr. Farhad. Dr. Farhad, I think you are muted.
Sorry, Dr. Ahmed, thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, this is a very important topic. Share of Islamic banking system is increasing in the total, in the global financial system. And it is interesting that Islamic countries are adapting the Islamic financial system based on Sharia and also according to the new technologies, including digital currency. Thank you very much. So next, I would like to invite Mr. Chia Seron, the CEO of XQuant from Korea, for discussing this paper.
Thank you, Professor Farhad. Yes, today is both presentation from Mr. Tim Schlosser and Dr. Khalid are very interesting, and both talking about the application of a distributed ledger or cryptocurrency in financing of green project. The comment I would like to make is that regarding the distributed ledger technology itself, you know, principally when we look at currently our the traditional finance, trust is the foundation of the current finance. When, for example, we have a green project, JP Morgan, for example, is a lead manager of a green project. We trust the lead manager to to evaluate the project properly, and then therefore and give it to the investors. And then we also trust, for example, the government to look after to impose regulation on the issuer, and then to punish them if they are abusing the confidence of the investors. So trust is the foundation. But now on the distributed ledger here, when someone has a green, for example, a project to financing a green development, how can we monitor the accountability or the progress of the project? For example, because in the DeFi, this ledger, anyone can launch a project, and if in this case, what are the metrics to measure this? Okay, the progress. Is my project a real project, a green project, or is it any abuse? So I think this is a question that I will actually I like to ask for maybe both speakers on the either Islamic bonds or through decentralized ledger, or to Mr. Tim Schlosser through the what the project you were working on. Maybe Tim, would you can you start?
Yes, please, Tim.
Yeah, for sure. You're entirely right. That's the main issue, or like the main problem to solve to be able to fully adapt, or like to have to see mass adoption of DLTs. So one dimension I think is really crucial is regulation for it. First, I mean that to create trust between people who invest and people who have projects, to regulate how those interactions be legally enforced. So that's why I think regulation is key, like a public regulation, but that doesn't solve the issue of if you can trust if the project is green or not, right? But for that, I think the one example I brought up, the direct initiative, is quite interesting. It's really recent example, and they use directly censoring of climate-related data, which they use. So with measuring, reporting, and verification to bring it directly into a ledger, and so that the investor can directly see that the data is there. I know that there's now more and more integration with sensors directly, so that you have directly the links between the real world and DLT. But also you need both, I think. I mean, that direction is really key, but also the regulative part to enforce things which are done in the system, because so far it's really separated system, quite unregulated, right? So if you have a smart contract, you trust the smart contract, but what happens? I mean, like you have it in the digital system, but I mean, there's no court which will enforce it. And I think those two dimensions are key.
Yes, absolutely. I think currently there are some computer vision, algorithm which is capable of, for example, using satellite image to look at deforestation, to look at the biodiversity, to look at the loss of land space, to look at CO2 emission from different regions. So in fact, all those data can be maybe made public somewhere in the ledger. And then, for example, I think you mentioned about Oracle. Some Oracle in the DeFi will access to it as the absolute truth. And then after that, all the project can be linked to can use to the Oracle to get those data. But I think, of course, the challenge is any organization capable of doing that, and make those data available. I think this is one issue that needs to be solved in order for the green digital finance to thrive.
And maybe one comment to that. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, in the end, the link. So the issuer of the project needs to be trusted. I mean, you can have you should make it open source, definitely, so you can see the code of whatever is written there. But you will not eradicate the fully the integration of the human somewhere or an institution, right? That should be key. And I think often like DLT is looked at, oh, that's a savior, we can solve with it with the technology all problems, but that's not true, because you always will have those links to create the trust.
Absolutely. I think ultimately, we still need some human intervention and to trust someone that is trustworthy, and to maybe assess the credit or assess the quality of the data, etc. Absolutely, yes. And Dr. Al-Khalik, do you want to make some comment regarding this problem of trustworthiness of the project, and how can we monitor the program?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly agree with your idea, and I see that of course, one thing is that you offer a technology. Secondly, is that it should be some certain initiative as well, how to govern that particular technology. Obviously, technology is just the tools, and you need a certain institution or someone, a higher authority to govern that. So I believe your point is, I suggest that that is something that we have to put in order, that the governance part also is important. But on top of that, I also believe that opportunities also have to be given to the public, so that they have the options to choose. For example, like when we have numbers of financing facilities, there shouldn't be only one, they should be catered for numbers of options. So with that, perhaps it could open further the opportunities in providing financing facilities to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also for the public to be able to make a good choice, I think information is important. They need to be able to know in the detail, each green finance, is it, for example, this project, is it really green or not? And I think from that point of view, AI can really help a lot to find it. For example, we can use natural language processing to find out any information related to different projects, and also even to detect maybe greenwashing For example, this if this project is mentioned about this, but then you can find some conflictual information somewhere else, inside some public data, then this can be kind of a sign. And you can also find maybe some information from some whistleblower, who are writing some blog and etc. And NLP also can do that. So this is actually what we are doing in Issuance. Okay, so that's my comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chia, and thanks to panelists for their presentations and also for responding to the comments, to the good comments that Mr. Chia raised. So let's see if there is any question. So Mr. Yoon Sung John from previous session had a question that we didn't have enough time, but now we have time. So please ask your question.
Yes, I joined yesterday's seminar, also joined today, so I'm very happy to the professional, the fintech, the technology, or the professor. So I'm wondering, most people emphasize the green digital finance. So, but it's green. We develop green digital finance. So we need budget. So we attract the investors. So, but it's as I know, according to the EU taxonomy, investors' role is very important in sustainable development and mitigation in the future. But there are also there may some the sample or the criteria for the investor to invest in mitigation or this green digital finance. So how much is the reasonable or plausible the return from the investment in mitigation or green digital finance? So I want to ask you, anyone, to tell my question. Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, this is an important question. Team or Dr. Ahmad or Mr. Chia, if you want to answer to this question. Yeah, because so if you want to add, so when we're talking about these kinds of investments, so these are not guaranteed investments. So the risk is existing. Yeah, the risk is existing, and utilizing these technologies, so I mean, will help to reduce the risk. So it will make the project more clear for the investors utilizing these technologies, and it will help to minimizing some parts of risk. But it doesn't mean that the risk is not existing. And on the other hand, generally speaking, when we are talking about green project as a whole, so in many cases, the rate of return is a matter, because although we are talking about environment is important and so on, but generally speaking, many investors are still looking at rate of return and risk. So if rate of return is low and risk is high, so we cannot expect to have the high inflow of investment to this sector. So this is role of government to introduce initiative to increase the rate of return of the project, and introducing these kinds of technologies to reducing the risk. For example, there are different ways in different countries for that introduce for increasing the rate of return. For example, establishment of credit guarantee, or return of some tax return from the side of a government, a spillover tax return. So these ways can help to increase the rate of return of the project and make them more interesting for the private investor, because ultimately private sector needs to come and invest. So these gaps need to be filled by private money. So if there is any other comment from the panel.
So I think maybe the advantage of using a distributed ledger for financing project is that we can make some process automatic. For example, using smart contract. For example, when there's some payment of dividend or some coupon, etc., and those process can be automatic through smart contract. So it reduce maybe settlement risk and accelerating the process. But of course, it doesn't really avoid counterparty risk entirely, because if there's no collateral, for example, that is attached to the project, then it will fail. But I think the distributed technology has this capacity to somehow always attach some collateral with it, and therefore make the for example the future payment be more certain. But of course that comes as a cost. So somehow it's an issue that has to be solved, because most of the time people who are raising money for the project, they don't have money, therefore they don't have collateral to put in. So and that is a kind of a chicken and egg problem that the technology has to solve.
Thank you very much.
I have another question. So according to EU the papers, the reasonable return is just 2.5% to 3%. But investors, the first time is to require 7%. But EU as just the reasonable return is the 2.5% to 3%, because it's green digital or mitigation is not private sector. Investment itself in green, for example, as the police station or the other renewable energy, it's a public sector. Even though the private use the same energy, electricity, as the pure from the generated by the pure person, the fire, the burn at the plant, or the other as the wind plant, but the energy is the same. But it's just which plants we get the electricity. So it's so important. So if we receive the electricity from the power plant, at the wind power plant or the solar plant, it's maybe it's public problem or the environment problem. So it can reduce the carbon dioxide or the methane and so such like that. But it's but at first time most the Asia countries, maybe their technology is not the better than the other countries. As I know, in the United States, their renewable energy, the BEP break-even point rate is $9 1 kilowatt, yeah, 1 kilowatt. But it's another is the fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is the break-even point. Is the range is very wide, 3 to 5 to 18 as the interest rate. So we can reduce the power producer plants. So I think is about but there the United States, maybe there the new renewable energy skill or technology is very good compared to other the Asia, right? Especially in Korea or the other countries. So, but we especially is the Eastern investors that invest in that kind of the technology, green New Deal or that. Then as we require the more maybe interest rate. So it's the problem, I think. So yeah.
I think it is a truth that the Korean investors used to be very high interest rate, due to some availability of other type of risky financial product. But in absolute term, in today's world, where interest rate is almost zero, in Japan, in Europe, you definitely, 2 to 3% is a good rate. But of course, comparing to other type of product available and risky product, this is too low. I think this is probably a matter of educating maybe the Korean investors. to be more realistic.
Yes, thank you very much. So if there is any other comments, questions? Okay, if not, since we ran out of time in this session, let me wrap up this session, and I express my thanks to panelists, presenters, and discussant Mr. Chia for the valuable comments that mentioned. I hope these comments can help to revise the chapter and preparing the final chapter in a better way. Thank you very much. So we will have one more session. Before that, let's have 5 minutes break. And now is 5:46. Let's come back 5:50 or 5:51 Japan, Korea time. Okay, see you soon. Thank you very much for returning back. So let's start the last session, session 4, which is on role of fintech and financial innovations in scaling up the green digital finance, the second part of this. So in this session, we will have 3 presentations. The first presentation is by Professor Lee Kun Jong from Yonsei University, Uzbekistan. The presentation is on asymmetric information in conventional bond, green bond, and green digital bond. Professor Lee, thank you for joining, and we are waiting for you.
Okay, thank you. The Professor Fahad and the Professor Sukhyun, thank you very much for inviting me. And also the Professor Yoshino and then Dr. Peter Morgan, nice to see you. And then also nice to see you, all the participants. Today, I would like to explain about asymmetric information in conventional bond and green digital bond. Especially why I just make the topic, this one is I would like to make the framework for the digitizing and green digital bond issuance in the information asymmetric. But before you already know about what it means the asymmetric, the information, I do not explain the detail. But the one problem is the asymmetric information mean the investor, already the Professor Fahad explained, one problem is the green bond or climate bond. Problem is the investor cannot trust. That's why high risk and low return. Therefore, the investors, we should promote, if we want to promote the green bond, and we need trust and transparency from the issuer or the finance intermediate institution. And therefore, before I just research about the asymmetric information, I have to show my paper is the trustee and transparency. That's my co-author is the computer science. Because we want the research about the digitalization, this one mix it with the social science professional and then computer science professional. That's my co-author. My colleague, we working together in the Yonsei University, Uzbekistan, who obtained the MIT, the PhD computer science, and then won the prestigious university in the Korea post-tech. And then that's why I want to show to the framework for the digitizing green bond issuance in the information asymmetry. Okay, that's why the introduction is that this paper conduct empirical test to resolve information asymmetry. That's why first of all, I compare with the conventional and the green bond, the related to the ESG and the CSR and the SDGs. Then find my result, and then we already understand that we need more transparency and then reduce the information asymmetry. That's why how can we reduce the information asymmetry? That's why I would like to use the digital green bond. That's why I use this, especially in the blockchain. These are research reviews. Okay, shortly I explain information asymmetric, as you know, the ESG. Also problem is the already the Professor Yoshino, also the yesterday presentation, already we understand one problem is not fixed one evaluation about ESG. That's one problem is the bond rating or ESG rate agency. How can we trust the rating? The one of problem. That's the lack of environmental information disclosure by the borrowing company prevent from the knowing the real impact of environmental project. Okay? That's why the second one is the conventional bond and green bond. This is the same in the conclusion. We don't know exactly because many different result. But one sure, despite the rapid growth in the green bond market, transparency remained a concern among the investors. The mention about conclusion in the old paper comparing conventional bond and green bond. Therefore, I wanted to make the green digital bond. Especially, I focus on smart contracts in the blockchain protocol mitigate uncertainty economic with the asymmetric information since the blockchain. Therefore, I just go to the directly to explain about how can I make the research empirical test from the comparing green bond and the conventional bond. That's why they use this one is I think the first time they comparing the Asian market and the world market in the 7 index, Bloomberg, S&P, GSC, Spot, S&P, GSCI, and then the so on, and the Bloomberg EM, MCI. The conclusion, the second day, after I just make the empirical test, how can I make the fundamental effect blockchain based on this empirical test? We will be building the framework and the buyer and the uncertainty, and then we use the blockchain endogenously reconfigures information asymmetric via the quality, differentiation, and the platform segment. Okay, now the finding. The finding is also same. The researcher, the results show that there's not statistical significant difference. But especially the Asian market is not much the significant and return comparing the return of the conventional and then green bond. But the world market index MSCI world significant to relate to the more higher the return in the green bond than the conventional bond. That's therefore the blockchain, the research and framework for the digitizing green bond issuance in the information asymmetric mean. When we use the blockchain, how can we make minimizing for the information asymmetry? That's sorry. This one is the section 5 framework of digitalizing green bond for the minimizing information asymmetry. There's first of all, who participant of the green bond. That's why we following the key actors or key player in the green bond system according the Capgemini in the 2016. Also, this one is I agree about the factors of the participants of the green bond. Number one, issuers. The second one is the validators. Third one is investor, and fourth one is the regulators. And then the issuer mean we already know about the issue the bond. Okay, bond issuers, some company, government. Also the finance institution, and the validators mean we know the charge about verifying impact report and the project and framework level, and the ensuring the green place and the green debt plans are met. That means some intermediary. And then investor is that we already use two things. One is the finance institution or the personal individual person who want to buy the green bond. last one, the regulator. The regulator mean we already discussed about the regulation. That's why the regulator mean some government. Okay, and also we make some regulate about the transparency or how can we make the minimizing of the information asymmetry. That's why in case of China, government directly make the regulate. Okay, also I think the many countries also try to the associate or the professional, the institution make the regulators. That's why they use the four main the key factors. And then I show the architecture of the blockchain participant network. This one is from the 2019 Vangelis Malmas. That's why I did the same with my ideas, also my opinion. And the number one is investor. Okay? That's why the second one is the validator, and third one is the regulator and investment. That's why the validator, this one is not only three, okay? Because sometimes the 2 or 1 or 4, we don't know. This one we can say the syndicate. Insurance also say, insurance also make some syndicate, but a lot of investor. And the regulator, they contact to the evaluate, and then they make the monitoring together with the issue. This one is the architecture of the blockchain participant network. And then regarding about the blockchain participant network in the figure 1, now this I make the drawing to the explain about the principal agent theory framework for the green bond project. That's why we have to carefully thinking about the what happened to this. Are usually in the regarding to the principal agent theory to the risk. One is the aversion the selection, and the second one is the moral hazard. That's why the different usually the agency wanted to make it themselves the interest. Therefore, we make the issue and then bond rating and the bond rating validators and validators. That's why the issuer and the validators and then the rating agency, they make this around to investor. That's why if you look at the interconnection together with the issuer, the validator, investment, and then we make it some give to issuer. For example, issuer give to the bond rating, validate some information, and then they give to the issuer. Okay? And the issuer can then monitoring about some report, any other document, also make that. That's why regarding about this drawing, how can we make the reduce minimization of the asymmetric information? That's why I show the figure 3. And then this one is the framework for the green bond project with the 3 parties. That's why the investor also wanted to get some performance. We already discussed about the performance. What is the performance? Mean the 2 things. One is the coupon rate, and the second one is the return or something like yield or the bond. That's why the issuer should give to performance, and the investor must be invest. And the second one, that's why the validators and the bond rate give the interconnected, give to the information and monitoring. That's why how can we use the blockchain, regarding about the framework. There's a first of all issue usually government or the finance institution, also company. That's why the probably issue, they have some self-interest from the principal agent theory. That's how can the blockchain prevent to the moral hazard, self-interest. Also the investor, also they wanted the portfolio. That's sometimes they have the self-interest. Of course, that's why one problem is we starting in the bond rating validators. Because the contract must be there to contract, but in the bond rating and the ESG rating agency, they don't need a real contract with the issuer and investor. Just they give to information and monitoring. Therefore, we carefully thinking about the blockchain. How can we distinguish and segment from the asymmetric minimization asymmetric in the non-contract and
time
contract.
is limited.
Yeah. That's of the smart contract in blockchain regarding about the framework, and then we can make the issue, validator, investor, and the monitoring information, performance, and then interconnect, and then contract code used by the contract green bond, hyperloop data, and then give to the interconnect for the execution distribution. That time we can make the blockchain network. The conclusion is that the proposed blockchain enabled framework provides sustainable benefit. It has untapped potential to increase trust and the efficiency in bond issuance and procedure by the simplifying ownership, the registration, and the green bond investment, for example, coupon bond proceeding. And the scalability difficult to plug large-scale blockchain systems are barrier to adoption, and especially in the public blockchain network. And then also block size and the response time, transaction volume, so example of blockchain scaling concern. As the networks expand and the number of users in the various real-world blockchain applied growth, such a circumstance offer significant difficult to blockchain developer and the early adopter. That's why this one is the framework about digitalizing green bond issue in the information asymmetry. It's a full paper. I just explain more detail, and then we already with the course we try to really we can use this one in the practice or not. That's why also we make the code used to be Ethereum. Ethereum, the coin, the free software. That's why we already starting to make the real practice in the how can we make the minimization information system for the digital green bond. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. This is very interesting idea and very interesting presentation. Thank you. So next presentation is by Mr. Surajit Iyer from Octas ESG from India. The presentation is on role of banks and other financial institutions in enhancing green digital finance. Please.
Good afternoon. I hope the slide is visible.
Yes, it is clear.
It's showing in presentation mode, right?
Yes, it is in presentation mode.
Perfect. Okay, so good afternoon and thank you, Professor Farhad, for the opportunity and greetings to all colleagues here. So while we will be focusing our chapter on the roles of banks and financial institutions, one point I would like to add here is that all the authors, the co-authors in this, we are all largely from the practitioner background rather than from the academia background. So just to quickly, in a few seconds, summarize, Namita is one of the pioneers of the green finance space in India, launched some of the first products in her previous role at the bank. Percy has been a leading tech-related practitioner and also researcher, for that matter, based in North America. And I have also, I mean, if I talk about myself, I've also come from a financial markets background, but I've also worked on the digital business initiatives in that role. So had a first-hand chance to work on those aspects as well. And then eventually in my role as a freelance research consultant, worked on responsible fair AI blockchain projects, research projects. And then, and even in our current Octas ESG, which is an advisory company on sustainable finance and ESG, we do have a clear, a very interest in tech and ESG intersection. And that was one of the reasons why we found this book chapter called very interesting. And we went ahead to apply to Professor Farhad. So essentially what we are looking at in this chapter is what would, what does it take? What will it take for banks to do something in the green finance, green fintech space, given the challenges we have been facing to scale up SDG financing, or if I put it very loosely, the green financing. We are, I mean, just to give a very quick overview, that fintech per se has proved very resilient despite the COVID year. It's still seen over $100 billion in inflows. But the bigger question is from the bank's perspective, because the banks is serving certain needs and it's serving certain demographic clients. So from the bank's perspective, it is the lens we are looking at. See, at the end of the day, banks still remain the predominant source of credit in most of the developing countries, where bond markets and other forms of mechanisms are still underdeveloped. And while the low-income communities have their own set of challenges, believe it or not, so do the upper-income communities in their own way. Now, if I put this in perspective for the upper-income communities, when it comes to the main challenge that banks and FIs are trying to address, it's about choice, that your basic financial needs are taken care of, but then how do you create or give access to a choice of products, preferably a choice of products that address green outcomes, while mobilizing HNI or upper income people's money. For the middle income, it is more about financial planning, if I put it that way, for the middle class. So for the middle class who have some money in the pocket and may want to do something, may want to invest in ESG mutual funds that are coming up, or other forms of ESG-oriented financing products that are coming up. How do you plan it? How do you offer that planning? And that is where the role of banks leveraging fintech would be very useful for this. And also for the low-income communities, of course, it is the small ticket credit. So that is why microfinance, microcredit has become so much the norm in most countries like ours. I am based in India. Microfinance is one of quite a big institution here, big industry here. And small ticket credit remains the most important need. So if I put this in terms of needs now, so we can easily categorize these needs into payments. Either fintech can enable the flow of payments to the banks. Fintech can enable the mobilization of savings into the banks. Fintech can create the facility of sanctioning credit from the banks. And fintech can enable protection products like insurance, etc., distributed by the banks. How can these needs be captured within the green lens is something also that we are looking at incorporating in this chapter basis our research. SDG financing, all of you would be familiar with these standard numbers, that there is a $5 to $7 trillion dollar investment requirement to achieve the SDGs per annum, and there is a big investing gap. Now, the main question that we want to raise, and this is something we've raised in the abstract as well that we submitted, is that everyone says the money is there. So why isn't the money coming into the system for achieving green outcomes or SDGs? So what is stopping it, if I put it that way? Right. So that is where the role of emerging technologies through fintech solutions can prove essential to create improved outcomes for both the customer and the banks. And I mean, essentially, the idea is how can you make it possible to justify the raising of additional capital in front of the financier, especially when it comes to the private sector financiers or private sector banks or private sector financial institutions, because they have a fiduciary duty of protecting the money trusted to them. So it is not to say that, listen, you want to protect the environment, you should invest here. You have to justify that with data. You have to justify that with measurable, monitorable data. And that is one fundamental challenge where a lot of development sector projects fail in or are falling short in. And that is the essential challenge we have raised even in our abstract, and I'll come to that eventually. That is paucity of verifiable, monitorable, measurable data is what we are basing our chapter on. Now, if I largely, put the chapter outline in perspective, the way we are going about the work, it's still a work in progress. So I may not be able to share full findings as of now. We're still in, but broadly, the approach we envisage and we are working towards is that the basic need is to raise more SDG financing, right? And focus on how the green digital mechanisms or the green fintech mechanisms can be leveraged by the institutions to close that financing gap and ultimately enable the banks to be an agent for positive change. So that is where the overarching thought process is. Now, going to the next level, that if banks remain the core mechanism for financial transaction, especially in large population developing countries, be it through savings, credit, etc., then how can the role of the banks be augmented in order to provide this? And especially because banks occupy a position of trust, especially in markets, developing markets where financial literacy is low. So the banks have to move within those constraints while ensuring public trust is not damaged, because a lot of new fintech solutions or any digital solutions have also created an issue around the trust, which is why explainable AI or fair AI have become a big topic, or ethical AI have become a big topic in themselves, research topics in themselves. Green fintech landscape, what we aim to do here is to highlight some of the initiatives by the banks or even standalone startups or even countries. There are some countries who have done fantastic work around these spaces. We want to highlight a bit on them, that what is it they are doing, and try to put that into a bit of a profile. And there a very fundamental question comes up is that, and this is something banks have been struggling with even when it comes to digital business solution, forget green fintech. It is, do you acquire a startup and integrate that solution into your portfolio, or do you set it up from scratch? So do you hire the people, given that there is a dearth of talent of those people? Those are all pragmatic challenges banks and institutions face. So we are also trying to speak with some industry experts at the intersection of green and digital, the green finance and digital space, and trying to collect their views on this, and add those insights as well in the chapter. So hopefully that could also be possible. What are the primary technologies being involved? I'll speak a bit more on this on the opportunities section. And the ultimate issue and the ultimate objective is to achieve the outcomes that marry with the challenges that you see in the next box. So the challenges we have highlighted very quickly is that the absence of measurable and monitoring data in many SDG projects, one can see in many developing countries. There's issues around, even where M&E reports are issued, there's issues around misreporting of data, and in the worst case scenario, issues around benefit fraud. So those break the trust of financiers and create challenge to dissuade private sector capital from looking at these, and ultimately creating a divergence between outcomes. So in India, we dug up some data and we found that there's a huge gap between the rate of growth of CSR funding, and which essentially focuses on health and education sectors, and the rate of growth in the HDI index for India, which also incidentally focuses on health, education, livability. So there's a big divergence between that. That's what, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years data, so that raises a lot of issues. Questions around this challenge. So given there's a supply, moving to the opportunities, there's also a supply demand issue where even where certain financial services are supplied, there is no demand often, because the demand requires a behavioral nudge. So the question is, how can fintech innovations be leveraged to create that behavioral nudge demand as well to drive financial inclusion? Several emerging technologies are coming up: blockchain, machine learning, AI, robotics, remote sensing, geospatial, etc. Technologies are being used within fintech solutions. Now the question is that which are the ones that are most easily doable for banks? Which ones will help achieve the objective of verifiable, granular, immutable data records? Which one will help better credit underwriting processes for green projects? We have, tokenization has, there's a lot of research coming up around tokenization, how it can create financing for SMEs, and ultimately which would help achieve SDG 8 and 9, given that SMEs are a major employer of human capital in developing countries. Yeah, sorry, we're back here. So fintech applications, while they can have a huge, wide range of applications, apart from the monitoring aspect, there is also the advantages it can create in terms of investor reporting. It can enable better risk pricing to which would help in capital allocation, visualizing tools that help look at what is the impact created in terms of transition to low carbon models. And we will also be adding some recommendations basis all the findings in the chapter eventually. So, that is also one section we will be focusing on. Very quickly, I wanted to highlight some use cases we've dug up so far. And of course, use cases will be a fundamental part of the chapter anyway. So for instance, a green fixed deposit in India, we call it. In many countries, we may call it term deposit. So an Indian bank, incidentally, our own managing partner and co-author of this chapter, Namita, was leading this initiative at her previous role at this very bank, where they set up this green fixed deposit product, where it had 8% interest rate at that time, with the proceeds earmarked towards SDG sectors. Korea, blockchain-enabled social impact bonds. So many of you may know, most social impact bonds are essentially illiquid private loan contracts. They're not bonds in the true sense. So that reduces their tradability, and that creates a problem to scale it up. So Pan Impact Korean agency of the Korean government has pioneered how to use blockchain to securitize the transaction and the investment records of the bond, and hence create it as a tradable bond, tradable commodity, and scale up the financing. In Syria, you would not normally associate fintech innovations with Syrian situations, given the reality there. But Syrian refugee camp in Jordan has a very interesting case around fintech, where World Food Program, in order to monitor the payment of certain subsidies for food, using fintech-based biometric and blockchain solutions to ensure that food coupons are verified and only those are reimbursed against, and there is no benefit fraud happening. Similarly, there is a food wallet solution for poor communities coming up even in Canada called Hyperpay. The last one in Spain, Ethic Hub has launched a peer-to-peer crowdfunding platform to enable access to affordable credit for agriculture sector workers. Now, directly or indirectly, all of these examples do address SDG goals, and that is why we are outlining that how can the objective in this chapter is that how can these sort of examples be emulated or replicated within the banks. So right now, these solutions are being provided by different types of organizations. How can they be emulated within banks? And what will it take for banks to scale up such green fintech solutions as part of their offering and raise capital for green outcomes? So to conclude broadly, the idea is that the chapter, in terms of how can banks and FIs adapt and leverage fintech solutions to achieve SDG-oriented outcomes within the boundaries that it must operate in terms of financing, risk, etc., in order to achieve the intended outcomes of greater volumes of sustainable finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Surajit. This is a very interesting chapter, and thank you for your contribution. So the next presentation is by Dr. Yu, Dr. Xinjiang Yu. This is on roles and tasks of P2P lending platforms in vitalizing green finance. Dr. Yu, please. Your mic is mute. Please unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Please.
이거 왜 안 내려가냐? 원래 the P2P lending, I think is kind of a platform to directly link fund supplier to a fund demander. It's very different from a traditional financial institution like banks. Status of P2P lending platform in Korea. As you see on the screen, also last year, Korea was the first in the world to enact the online investment linked to financial business act. It is kind of the P2P act passed through the Korean National Assembly. So this legal definition for P2P finance, that is online investment linked to financial business, was prepared. Last June this year, Financial Service Commission Korea registered 3 companies as the first online, first P2P lending companies, and the 41 companies are still applying for the next registration. P2P finance in Korea has continued to grow since about 5 years ago, 2016, but the credit of the fund demander was degraded according as as I say the COVID-19, and so the delinquency rate has risen recently very sharply. It's up to 16.6% as of last June. But I think the P2P loan platform can be a very new alternative of financing for the particularly revitalization of green finance. Also, independently, I think very good business model. So I think that if we recover from COVID-19, it will be a big role in many areas. Advantage of P2P lending platform for the activation of green finance. You see there are 5. P2P lending platform has the flexibility to respond to the diverse needs of consumers and suppliers in the green industry, and also issues high cost effectiveness by efficiently and quickly, the computerizing the processing work online very quickly and efficiently rather than in offline. Number 3, from borrowers perspective, in the green industry, it is possible to reduce searching cost and also have a transparency in funding. And therefore, it's possible to connect money consumers and investors in green industries in real time, nearly real time compared to analog on the platform. Finally, it is also possible to connect a large number of small investors who want to invest in the green industry as well. The role of a P2P lending platform. First, green bond issuance with digital. As you know, all over the world, funds have been rapidly flowing into the green bond market, which is focused on eco-friendliness. I think P2P lending platform can play a considerable big role in raising green bonds. For example, P2P finance can be used issue bonds to raise funds along with national or local scale. For example, in the issuance of green government bonds in the UK, a P2P company called Abundance successfully raised £2 million. Second, financing of eco-friendly startup. Eco-friendly startup, everyone knows, generally have low credit ratings because of a startup. So making P2P make it more easily the funding. P2P platform can secure funds for new venture companies that develop new renewable energy development and environmentally friendly technology. So I think, the P2P, basically, along with, the crowdfunding, very much, it's kind of, the long tail, the small money and so many people. So I think the reducing burdens of the investors, and so even though low credit rating startups can connect with the P2P lending vehicles. Third, construction of green industry, big data through a platform is pretty important. In green finance, I think it is very, very important to connect a P2P platform without time restriction due to the characteristics of the environmental industry. Importance of the real-time measurement and accuracy of the real-time measurement. So in the measurement and monitoring of the environment system, securing accurate and real-time data determines the success of the system. So I think the not green finance, green digital finance, and the digitalization connected with each other is pretty important. Example of a P2P lending platform for the activation of green finance. As for Korea, Root Energy, as a Korean fintech company, provides the peer-to-peer finance service that enables local residents and the public to invest in new and renewable energy power generation projects, such as solar and wind power. As of May this year, the accumulative loan amount of 74 power plants stood at $38 million. Is expected to provide local residents with opportunities to make a long-term investment with relatively high returns and create environmental value, such as responding to climate change. It is not a Korean case. Swedish fintech company Trine is providing a P2P finance service that helps the individual invest in solar project in developing countries such as Africa. The company raised a total of $64 million investment, gathered a total of 11,952 individual investors, very many the investors connected with, achieved the average annual return of 7.8%, is pretty high, and also the total delinquency rate is only 1.5%. It's pretty good. British fintech company Climb Aid Invest is also provides a P2P financial platform. It's applied to a climate change project. It's connected with the UK ISA account, independent saving account. So it's a much systemized, so many individuals connected with P2P lending vehicle in UK. Produce Pay, the P2P platform, is to provide the cash flow to farmers. It's in the United States and Mexico and other Latin America as well. So it's a P2P lending vehicle, can be applied in many areas. Challenge of P2P lending platform. Even though there are a lot of merits in P2P lending, but however, up to now, P2P lending platform has a kind of problem. First one is that lacking information and data construction, because this class, in traditional, the banks or financial institution perspective, they are, the credit rating is pretty low, so they will not, the supply, the funding. So there is a very, the database is pretty small. So I think through the P2P lending, we can, the important thing is that accumulate those kind of data. So I think as a challenging point, if we accumulate those kind of data, I think P2P loan platform could be very efficient, and also it could be the new give a new vehicle area where the traditional financial institution cannot give, and also it is very easily connected and fused with the infrastructure technology like the ABCD, AI, blockchain, cloud computing, and the IoT, etc. And so, so I think in terms of the efficiency and the fusion or the market expansion or business model expansion is pretty good. And I think there's some prospects and then implications. From the point of view of fintech, most of the users of P2P loans are SME or individual entrepreneurs who are relatively poor credit ratings. So as mentioned before, it functions as inclusive finance. Inclusive finance in connection with a vulnerable class, such as agriculture class or small scale power generation or small the SME, etc. So in terms of the inclusive finance, the P2P lending vehicle is a pretty good role. Second, the infrastructure to connect P2P consumers and suppliers in a timely manner will be established by analyzing big data collected through IoT with I think it's a kind of challenging point as well, because even though we say many times IoT, but still IoT in the era that has not come to us. So it is a kind of a challenging point. But the development as the development of the IoT, I think it enables correct financing through timely and accurate analysis. So financial institutions also have a partnership with P2P companies to help P2P companies preemptively create and operate loan products in environmental industry area, where direct investment or loans are very difficult. It's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yu, for your interesting presentation on P2P lending. So next we will have a discussion, and I'm going to discuss these three presentations and giving some comments. So the first presentation by Professor Lee, it was interesting presentation, and Professor Lee, yeah, a very interesting presentation, and the green digital bond, the concept is interesting. In actually the tokenization of the green bonds, the idea that you have mentioned is increasing the security, transparency, and reducing the transaction cost that can be helpful for, for increasing the green finance. I just shared one paper with you in the chat box. So this is a paper by Schletz, Nasiri, and Lee, 2020. This paper is also on tokenization of green bond. I read that paper and I also read your presentation. So different, papers. However, please read this paper. So in order to show your contribution to the literature, because that paper is more on that it's a SWOT analysis, talking about the weaknesses and also the strength points of the green digital finance. Your work is showing the exact scheme of a green digital bond, but please also read this in order to show it. And other things which are important to consider to add in the chapter is what are the constraints for developing green digital bonds and the applicability of it, because when we are talking about a solution, so for advanced countries, developed countries, such kinds of technologies are applicable, but whether tokenization is of green bonds and also the idea that you have mentioned, is it really applicable to developing, less developed countries and so on? So talking about applicability is also important. So, but generally very interesting chapter. Regarding Mr. Surajit's chapter, this is also very interesting chapter and a very interesting presentation. You're considering the banking sector, financial institutions. So I have one suggestion. So when we are talking about financial institutions and green digital finance, this point can be considered from two aspects. One aspect is the product that the banks and other financial institutions are providing, financial products. So how to digitalize those products that you have mentioned, for example, loans and other financial products, digitalization of these kinds of financial products. Secondly, role of financial institutions, especially the lending financial institutions such as banks, for funding green digital finance. So it means not their product, but funding and lending to the customers who are introducing such kinds of projects. So it would be interesting to consider from both of these aspects, but the chapter is also very interesting. Regarding Professor Dr. Yu's chapter, so the P2P idea is very interesting. So the comment that I have is regarding you have mentioned role of big data is very important. If such database is existing in Korea that already accumulated green digital data, not just green data, and what are the challenges for developing P2P in green digital finance and how to overcome them. It would be interesting to have more case studies. For example, the case of Root Energy that you mentioned is very interesting, and it's very interesting that they could transacted about $38 million for funding green projects. So if you have more of these cases, but by detail, that what they have done and what are the challenges, how to. And another interesting point, if you can cover in your chapter, is that if P2P lending platforms already expanded their international business in Korea, or whether it's just domestically, for example, for lending from Korea to other countries, and if so, how to cover the risks, exchange rate risk, especially whether the lending is in Korean won or in US dollar or other things. And another important point, if you can cover in your chapter, is the supervision and regulatory issues. What is the role of Korean FSS in supervising the P2P applications and so on, whether they need to get license directly from FSS? How is the supervision of Korean financial authorities on them? So this is also important, because when we are proposing a solution for other countries, we need to consider the regulatory aspect of it, supervisory aspect of it, and the performance, execution, and so on. But generally, very interesting chapter, and thank you very much. So if there is any comment from the panelists, I would be glad to hear. Dr. Professor Lee, do you have any comments or?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Mr. Surajit? No.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Yu?
Thank you very much. We have there's some data for root energy, and then we can communicate with them. Probably I think we can set up more. And also anyway, the first one, the P2P Act in the world. So we have a kind of detailed regulation. So we can describe that, and then probably I think it's a kind of a role model to other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there is any question, comment from the participants, okay, if there is no comment, so let's wrap up this session and also the whole webinar. Once again, I would like to use this opportunity to express my thanks to all esteemed presenters, panelists, discussants for spending their time in these 2 days webinar and for contributing to this book. I hope the comments that we all received during these 2 days webinar help us to improve our chapters and consider 2 things: that this book is on green finance, but by considering the digitalization. This is very important. So these are integrated topics. We need to consider them at the same time, not separately. And thank you very much. So I have already sent the guideline for writing the chapters. Please kindly follow that guideline, and I'm looking forward to, we are looking forward to Professor Hyun-Suk and myself, we are looking forward to receiving the full chapters by end of July, and then we will read and we will give comments on that. And for the webinar, I already uploaded the video of yesterday webinar in YouTube, and I put the link of it in the chat box. So please share it among your network. So this will help to disseminate this work and the idea and concept of this work to other countries and other regions. And the second day's webinar will be also uploaded in the same channel. Once again, thank you very much. Take care of yourself, and I hope after this pandemic we can gather and we meet together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Organizing such a lovely event. I really
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.